here we are, Royal
Right.
Galloway. Spinners of Yarns with Mr. Garry Bushell, X of Sounds, and various other newspapers.
Good to see you again.
Likewise. First time I think I met was 1982. So generally when I do these things, I start at the beginning.
Yeah,
You were born in South East London?
I was in Woolwich in 1955. Yeah, a long, long time ago.
So when it's kind of like obviously 55 music, when did music?
Well, that really was by coincidence. It was when Elvis had his first hit and things like that, and ITV came into existence. It was quite an exciting year. I mean, music changed completely in the second half of the 50s, didn't it? It was the birth of everything we grew up with, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who were the first ones that you
Lonnie
liked?
Donegan, probably.
Okay.
Because
So a bit of
apparently
skiffle.
there was a picture. There is a picture of me that my mum had of me playing a banjo when I looked about 4, maybe 5, who knows? But doing a Lonnie Donegan impression. But I've got no memory of this. Only the picture proves it happened. Yeah.
Yeah. So when
But I mean, yeah. God, I don't think I bought a record. My mum was into musicals and all that sort of stuff, and my dad was into country. So my dad was playing Johnny Cash and Marty Robbins, and my mum was playing, I don't know, West Side Story, whatever. The first record I bought was by Millie Small, My Boy Lollipop.
Okay, yeah.
Which I was probably about 9. Yeah. The first record I bought of my own money from myself. Yeah.
64, 60.
I think it was 64. Yeah.
So that, I mean, how much was that back then?
God knows. I remember where I bought it. I remember it was in Lewisham, but I don't remember how much it cost.
Yeah. So that's, I suppose that's when pop music was coming through in the early 60s.
Yeah. Obviously the Beatles and that whole thing, Dave Clark 5 and all these forgotten bands, or a lot of them are forgotten bands now, aren't they?
Yeah. So did you become a skinhead then in the late 60s?
I did
reggae?
not. No, I did not. I dressed the. Really, I wasn't quite old enough. But when I was about 15, so that was 1970, I did have the suede edge stylings, and I was playing. I started doing the DJ thing at the family parties and my nan's house and things like that. I'd always have I had all of those old records, like Young, Gifted and Black, and You Can Get It If You Really Want. Oh, fantastic music.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. That's the music I grew up on. That and obviously Tamla Motown and Stax and stuff. That was my music until that same year, 1970, one particular episode of edition of Top of the Pops, I saw Black Sabbath doing Paranoid and Deep Purple doing Black Knight on the same and I thought, fuck me, I've never heard anything like this. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
So I started getting into that, and then obviously after that Led Zeppelin, and it would have been then the Slades and the T-Rexes and stuff, and the people we shouldn't mention anymore, like Gary Glitter. But it was great music, and I just loved all that. Yeah.
So because I've been listening to the first Slade album, and that was probably their best album.
And Slade Alive was a great album.
Yeah. So you kind of like obviously glam came about mid 70s.
A bit earlier, I think. Yeah.
So when because your working career, you started working as a journalist in
a proper job. I was not July 1978. I joined the staff of Sounds. Well, I'd had my journalistic training on the Socialist Worker with Paul Foote.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. It was good. It was different. I quite liked. I mean, I was at the time I was very active Trotskyist, and I was into. I was working with. I mean, to be working with Tony Cliff and people like that was an eye opener to me. I was still young, and Cliff would just had this wonderful phrasing about him. He he would say things like, they're probably forbidden now, but back then he'd say things. There could be no revolution. No, hold on. There could be no female liberation until after the revolution. So put the kettle on, Joanna. And things like that, which of course we shouldn't laugh at, but at the time it was very funny. Yeah.
But so what made you want to become a journalist in the first place?
I always loved writing. I always loved reading. You okay? Yeah. I always. I remember. I think I was on a foreign exchange with a French student who was not the nicest kid in the world, but I remember having the Daily Mirror on a beach somewhere in the south of France and reading Keith Waterhouse's column and thinking, oh, this is lovely. I love the phrase. I mean, I always liked books, but Keith Waterhouse was the conduit, I suppose.
Yeah.
He was the drug that led me in to wanting to be but I remember my uncle worked on a crane. He had a crane down at the gas plant, and strangely, even though he bought the Socialist Worker off me when I was like a young radical, he would also buy the Sunday Express, and so I was able to read Sir John Junior and all these people who, again, you know, didn't fit in with my politics, but I just liked the character. I liked them as purveyors of their own views. And
yeah, I mean, in life you're better off to have an opinion than to just float.
Well, it's like Jerry Lee Lewis said, that you're either hot or you're cold. If you're lukewarm, the Lord will, whatever the phrase is, I can't remember now. What is the rest of that saying? I've started saying I can't finish it. If you're hot and you're cold, if you're lukewarm, then God will blight your head off, or whatever it was.
Yeah, which makes sense. So, but didn't you also, which you've never really gone it, you did a fanzine for a while.
I did, but
fanzine.
but I'm not. I don't want to overplay it because it really was just a Xerox thing, and I think the first issue was fucking 10 issues. I've made 10, and there was only 3 of them ever made. So, like, I did that. It was called Napalm, as in the bomb. And before that, we'd had a thing called Pink Tent, which we used to handwrite with kids at school. Because we were all like working class rebels at our school. And we had a thing called Pink Tent, which became a band called Pink Tent. But at the time we were doing, we'd do sketches, cartoons. It was like a strange comedy zine, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah.
And I used to have a lot of these. All the ones we did, I used to have when I lived in Eltham, but in my shed, and foolishly had not wrapped them up in plastic, and they were destroyed by mice, along with my only copy of Napalm. Yeah.
But that was punk based, punk influenced by that point.
Napalm was, but Pink Tent wasn't. No,
Okay.
Pink Tent was more influenced by the Beatles and Monty Python. That was
So it's when did you first become aware of punk then?
76.
76.
Yeah.
And who was that? Because a lot of people that I've interviewed over the years have said that punk was the fashion first. You know, it was the fashion that came out of discos, out of clubs, out of soul clubs.
Well, I wasn't aware of any of that. I wasn't aware of that. I was still quite young. I remember sitting with my mate Mark on the Cold Harbour estate up in Mottingham, listening to Orgasm Addicts and things like that, and Boredom and all these great Buzzcocks songs. And we liked the whole vibe of punk. And I think when I was doing the Socialist Worker stuff, there was a movement saying it must be fascist, it must be terrible, we must fight this. I said, you've got to listen to the Clash, you've got to listen. I'm defending it. There's actually it's not David Widgery. It's me versus someone else who was quite a well-known writer on Socialist Worker. But they were saying it's a terrible thing that's going to lead to all this right-wing stuff. And I'm saying, no, it isn't. You've got to listen to it. But I can't remember the exact details. That must have been 76 I wrote that. It must have been 76.
So which was the first band you went to see then?
Punk
band, that is.
The first band I went to see, ignoring your question, is
okay.
Hawkwind, by accident, because I was on a CND march when I was about 14 or 15, and we went to Aldermaston, and that's when they had Stacey, who was naked on stage, wasn't she? Painted.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it was the first bands I saw were Cockney Rebel. The first band I saw was Cockney Rebel, somewhere up in Waterloo. And then obviously the Clash. I remember going to see the Clash, the Jam, Subway Sect, and I think Sham 69. Might not have been Sham 69, but I think it was those 4 up at the Rainbow, and it was a front page of the Evening Standard, Punk Riot.
Okay.
That was fantastic. Great night. We'll see all them bands. Yeah.
Was that 77 then?
76 or 77, I can't remember. Probably was 77, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it would have been 77.
Because he was still rehearsing and...
Yeah, you probably, your memory's you're accurate than mine, I'm sure. But I mean, I saw the Jam in 76, I think, at the Roundhouse. Is that likely?
Possibly.
I'm not good on dates. I
mean, they were definitely playing 76, but 77 is really the year when
it all happened.
When New Rose came out. So then
I bought that on the day it came out, and at Shepherd's Bush. I was living on a White City estate, and I remember going down to the record shop at Shepherd's Bush and buying New Rose and putting that on the. Because it was a funny old year. Because he also had Boys Are Back in Town by Thin Lizzy. I think bands like Thin Lizzy would have been a lot bigger if it hadn't been for punk. Because punk come away and sort of stole their thunder to a degree. But yeah, I remember going out and buying that. God. And I loved the Clash. The Clash from my band. You know. They were the ones. It was their politics that probably drew me into music in the first place.
But they, out of all those punk bands, they were the ones that matured over time and took chances.
Yeah, they did. I mean, at the time I wasn't happy with it because I loved the first Clash album, liked the second Clash album. London Calling, I can look at it now and think I probably was over the top when I attacked it, but I just thought they'd sold out a bit because I think all of a sudden, no Elvis Beatles or Rolling Stones in 1977, and now you turn into the fucking Rolling Stones. And now I can look at it and think, I think it's one superb single album, but spread over 4 sides of vinyl, which it shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
But the great songs are really great on that album.
But I think
I didn't like Sandinista, that was shit.
Probably too many songs.
Too many songs.
I think you have to mature as a band. You can't do the same songs over and over again with each album because
you're right, but you can't say no Elvis Beatles or Rolling Stones and then turn into the Rolling Stones. But I the only thing later on about the Clash, I mean, I did genuinely love the Clash, and I'd still probably have a Clash tattoo if I had the chance. I think a lot of it was window dressing. Really, I mean, they were political, but they weren't really actively political. Yeah. I mean, when we went to whatever year this was, when the National Front marched through Lewisham and we stopped it, I think that was 76. It might have been 77. You'll correct me. But the Clash were there at the peaceful bit, but they weren't there at the violent bit. And I was at the violent bit when it all kicked off. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's because. That was a rising thing in the mid '70s, the far right.
Yeah.
In within trying to connect with music bands, you know. So it must have been quite concerning to. Well,
they didn't really start to have their musical side until later in the '70s, did they?
Yeah, '79 with Leeds and what they were trying to do in London.
Yeah. But I remember going up to Leicester and places like that, marching against the NF, because they were pretty big up that way, weren't they?
Yeah.
But I was at Red Lion Square. That was pretty nasty. Yeah, it did get very violent back then.
So you kind of like when did you join Sounds?
1978.
That must have been a no-brainer for you. You're doing what your passion is with music.
Yeah, I went in and saw Alan Lewis, who was the editor, for the interview. I was expecting to get some freelance work out of it, hoping to get freelance. And I took in the fanzines I'd written, the Napalms, and we had a conversation. And he said, "Well, show me what you can do." And over the next 8 or 9 days, I went out and did about 10 reviews and put them through. Back then, you couldn't email things. Put them through the door. Yeah. And after 10 days, I got a phone call. You got the job. So I got a staff job out of nowhere, really. And I think the first reviews I had published was the Clash at Aylesbury, supported by playing for the first time as the Specials, because that morning they'd been the Coventry Automatics, and that night they were the Specials, and that's when I met Neville and got on with Neville really well, and he wasn't even in the band then. Neville was the roadie then, so we had that was before Bernie held them back, didn't he? He said, "You got to hold him back till the time is right," and he held them back. The Specials back. And they wrote Gangsters about him, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was. I mean, it was such a thrilling time because people forget. Everyone says how wonderful the Enemy was. Enemy had killed off punk in their heads. Even Charles Shaw Murray had written. He'd given the first Clash album a bad review, and saying punk was dead and it was all shit. And I thought, I'm going out every night and I'm seeing all these great bands. How could it be dead? I mean, the early bands I wrote about, UK Subs. Skids, Ruts, Members. I mean, these were fucking great bands. And I got really annoyed on their behalf that they were being killed off. And I thought, no, it's not dead, it's still happening.
But it's like any kind of scene, it matures into the second stage and then goes into the third stage.
Yeah.
You know, maybe maybe it filters down to, you know.
You
down
could say that,
into-
or you could say the music business takes control again and makes the rebellion into
Yeah.
something marketable.
Yeah.
Because basically, what was new wave except punk made marketable? But having said that, brilliant people like Ian Dury and Elvis Costello
Yeah.
came through. So I'm not going to knock that.
Yeah. But it was an exciting time for music. It was all fast. Everything was quite fast. There was, you know,
It was
a new
exciting.
scene or a new thing coming through.
I think, and also what made it exciting was the fact that the record companies couldn't control it anymore. It was not them telling us what to like, it was it coming up on the floor. And that was a wonderful thing about it. And it was all of these fantastic, I mean, bands like Squeeze probably would have made it, but they wouldn't have made it so quickly if it hadn't been for the fact that punk had kicked down all the doors.
Yeah.
And it didn't only kick down the door for loud, fast punk, it kicked down the door for two-tone, it kicked down new mod, all of these fantastic things that came up, and maybe even new wave of British heavy metal because of the doors being kicked down.
So were you then? When did you first become aware of mod? Then a revival with the Jam?
1978, as early as that. When after All My Cons, I mean, I did go interview the Jam in '78, and the All My Cons album come out. But then there was the Great British Music Festival where a lot of them were at, and we used to go to. I used to go to the Bridge House in Canning Town, where there used to be Mod Monday, and you'd go there and see bands like, who I actually saw this band in 1976, the Purple Hearts, though they deny. When I saw them in 1976, they were called Jack, Plug and the Sockets, and they always denied that, but they fucking were. I saw them at Barking, the Polytechnic, and they were supporting Generation X. And they always deny that, but they were. But anyway, by the early part of '79, they were the Mod Mondays, and they were getting loads of people out, and it used to be full of young kids in Parkers. It was like, and they were a lot younger than the people going to pub gigs by then. You know, it was the start of something. And the Chords, and the Chords were obviously influenced by the Clash as well as the Jam, and
sure, yeah.
it was. I think it's a bit unfair. You know what it was like in the music business. When something starts happening, everyone gets involved too quickly, and I don't think those bands really had a chance to grow in before they got the full focus of the music industry on them. But obviously, then the last one I saw of this, the three, was Secret Affair, who were a different cut of the cloth altogether because they weren't really punk. They were obviously much more soul influenced, and it was basically soul with punkier words or with a rockier rhythm section or whatever. Yeah, but it was a great voice. He was like, he was a great singer. And they had Time Fraction and songs like that. I think My World and still stand up today, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But the Chords do as well.
The Chords do, yeah.
You know, the Chords. But it going back, it was everything moved quite fast. So, you know, but by the time 1980, 81, mod was over. For some.
Well,
you know.
Yes, but I think the reason was because it got leapfrogged by two-tone. And when I was in I'm trying to think of the years now. The years might be wrong, but I think I'm right to say that 79, you had Secret Affair headlining at the Lyceum, and you had these other bands like Madness, like the Selector, on the bill, and within a month they had become the bands because their records were so much more commercial, they were catchier, they were riding the tide better than the mod bands were, and so I loved Selector, really loved the Selector, and they were quite unfortunate really because they were curtailed. I mean, it all went up, to be honest with you, mostly it was about them. The Specials broke up and the Selector broke up after touring America, and that's such a lot of pressure. They did a lot of work out there, and that's what broke them. But they were particularly unlucky, the Selector, who, can I propose now to Pauline? I'm still available. That's my wife. No, I lost my track now by being stupid. Selector. Yeah, they were really unlucky because they had that record "Celebrate the Bullet" about a week before John Lennon was killed, and then everyone deliberately misunderstood the lyrics, and it killed them dead. But obviously back now with Pauline again and doing really well. I actually went to I went to New York with the Specials, and I went to Texas with the Selector in 1980, I think. And that was incredible to see them winning over new audiences. More of a struggle for the Selector because I was in Texas. People weren't expecting them to sound like they did. But the Specials were fantastic. You know, they did really well out there. But it broke them. It was so much pressure to put on a band to go and do those long tours. And you have to do a long tour to break America. You can't. There's no shortcut to breaking America.
Yeah. But is that then the pressure of the record label to get hit after hit after hit? And
of course it is.
You kind of then water yourself down for the next releases?
Really, you could take it in a more reasonable and considerate world. They'd have said, well, yeah, we'll do it in bits. You don't need to do 90 dates on the road or whatever. You don't need. You can take it a bit slower because it doesn't. You know, there is time to mature. There's time to grow. But it's so much pressure to go out and do gig after gig after gig. There was, we went down, actually, it was my idea, stupidly, to take, when we were in Dallas, I said, let's go down to the South Fork Ranch. And that was a heavy, heavy moment, because we turned up there, we were taking away, we were posing up, we were doing all the pictures about the South Fork, because I, love Dallas and J.R. Ewing and all that sort of stuff. Well, a load of geezers turned up with baseball bats, and it got really, really heavy, really quick. And it's just like, you forget how racist it was back in the day. We booked out of that hotel, and me and Ross Halfin went on to do UFO, also in Texas. And I remember this bellboy, who'd been really, really friendly to everybody to their face, came up to me and Ross at the end and said, "Oh, it might be good for you to go and see UFO." And I won't even use the word he used. No black people, let's say. He said, I just thought, fucking hell, really? Could we never had. I didn't know people who thought like that.
Yeah.
Back at home, we none of it. My nan always used to say, "There's good and bad in all races," and so to have someone to be so blatantly racist was quite a shock.
Yeah, America still is like that too.
Oh, without a
from
doubt.
the times I've been over there.
Yeah, without a doubt.
But
look when was it Neville? Was it? Oh no, I can't remember which one it was. One of the Specials, one of the black members of the Specials, it can only have been Neville or Linville, but I remember him telling me he went into a shop and they got really funny because he was in the shop until they heard his voice. When they heard his voice, they said, "Oh, sorry, we didn't realise you were English." If they thought it was just superficial nonsense.
Who used to pay for those trips then? The record label?
Record label did.
See, what a great job.
Oh well, except I was so puritanical and so socialist back then. I actually refused foreign trips for about 2 years, and it was only when I was offered trips with bands I believed in, I thought, I'm going to do this. So I think I had, in all the time I was there until 1980, I only went to America once, and that was to Alicia Bridges, believe it or not, with I Love the Nightlife in Chicago. Or Detroit, it was one of them. But then when the two-tone bands were going over, because I felt I was championing them and I wanted them to succeed, I did start going. So I went to the States several times with them. Ended up with this sounds like I'm name dropping, but I'm going to say anyway. I don't mind name dropping because I'm going to tell you that when I saw the Specials play at my father's place in New York, the person who picked me up in her record company limo was Debbie Harry. So I'm going over the Brooklyn Bridge, and I've got Debbie Harry there, and I've got Mark Stein there. Oh, sorry, Chris Stein there. Sorry, I've had a drink. Chris Stein there, Debbie Harry there. Chris is chopping out a line of cocaine for his own pleasure. I'm in a stretch limo driving over. The sun's coming down. All I'm thinking in my head is, wait till I tell them back at the Blackheath and Newbridge Working Men's Club about this. I picture myself.
But Debbie Harry, because that was my first record was Blondie Denise, and at the age of 11, she was the most amazing looking.
She was, and such a nice, smart woman as well.
But she was older than she was perceived at that time.
By about 10 years, wasn't she? Yeah. But I mean, of the three people I met, I was actually tongue-tied to the extent which I took a while to even be able to ask my question. Debbie Harry was the third. The first was Joe Strummer, and the second was Phil Lynott. Because I just loved them so much. And
did he become friends with Phil Lynott?
I like Phil, but I mean, I wouldn't have said I was a friend of his. No, I mean, I'd love to have been a friend of his, but he was great company. He was a great seducer. He showed how easy it was to seduce a woman by sitting at a bar. He sat at the bar and then held his head in his hands and looked like he was miserable. And within 3-4 minutes, 2 women had come up to him. Oh, you all right, Phil? And within 10 minutes, one of them was giving him a blowjob outside. That's all I'm saying. But the saddest memory I've got is the last time I saw him alive, which was in Birmingham, when I actually stepped over his groupie and saw the syringe on the floor to do the last interview I did with him. And it was a shame for him a man to have so much talent and so much promise, to have ended up a junkie.
Yeah. I mean, you don't really, late 70s, early 80s, you don't really understand drugs when you're a teenager. You're just coming into your teenage years.
No.
And
in fact, the first time I did cocaine was completely by accident, because I'm sitting there I was on the road with Eddie and the Hot Rods, and the guitarist, whose surname I forget, Dave, said, I was sharing a room with Dave, and he said, oh, do you want some of this? And I thought it was speed, because it was the right colour. And I thought, oh, that's not speed. Oh, yeah, you've had some Charlie, mate. Okay, fair enough.
It wouldn't have been called Charlie at that point.
No, it wouldn't have been. No.
I was too young.
But it was Charlie, as we know it.
So, kind of like through, because that first wave of punks is clearly identifiable, kind of like first wave, second wave, and then a third wave.
Yeah.
The second wave, you'd be talking about the Skids, you'd be talking about Sham 69.
Yeah. Ruts.
Yeah, the Ruts. I mean, even the Ruts, kind of like they were 79 when they released their first single. So
they were. I saw them in 78 though, and they were, funny enough, a parallel development to the Special, because they were combining punk and reggae in a different way. Yeah, you're right. And then we had the Upstarts and the Rejects as the third wave.
Yeah. Or kind of, you could say,
a third wave.
But I would say the third wave, for me, the second wave would be stroke 78 into 79, which would include the Upstarts, because the Upstarts released their first single, I think, late 78. The Rejects were 79. So you kind of like, you've gone, the first record, New Rose, kind of, if it's seemed that New Rose was the first punk record, then that was 77.
Yeah, it was. Then 76.
76. There was clearly a kind of like a change, really, of talking about you've got the fans coming in off the back of the first wave who were a bit more dedicated to the music, because they bought into the sale of the Clash, the Pistols, the Buzzcocks.
Yeah.
So they come in with their sound, and their sound is totally different, or similar but different to what the first bands came out. And Jimmy,
I think it got a bit realer as well, because a lot of the first bands, though I love them dearly, they were pretending to be what they weren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next lot were more real. They were more. I mean, like
was
Richard,
Jimmy real?
I like Jimmy, but as Judy Virtue once said, it must have been a fucking strong wind the day the Blowbells got down to Hersham. I think he was channeling the people around him, channeling. Yeah. But that's an opportunist way of breaking yourself through.
You work with your audience, I suppose.
Yeah.
And.
With the Upstarts, you just knew they were the real deal, and with the Rejects, they were completely fucking authentic.
But in '79, when I lived in Scotland, those last two Sham shows, Sham were the biggest punk band.
I was there. You were there, were you?
I was 11, 12. I was 12 at that point.
Yeah, well, the Sham's Farewell.
Yeah,
I was up there. That's where I met Scully. That was when the Pistols came on stage. Well, Stephen, Sham Pistols, and Branson was up there, and I remember that.
But it's down as one of the worst. The Rainbow is down as one of the worst. Gigs
they
weren't
going to do the Rainbow, but because Glasgow had been so successful, they thought, we'll do it for London, and I was there. It was just dreadful. Could you add the first? I come out of the tube at Finsbury Park, and the first thing I saw was, I'm not sure if I should say his name, but I know his name. an older Nazi sticking a glass in some kid's face to get his ticket to go in. And there was about 30 of these proper neo-Nazi British movement people, German movement we used to call them, and they managed to get around them a bigger mob of about 200 people, and this 200 people just ran round the rainbow, smashing it up really just terrible. And Percy had got rid of all the people who used to be his people on stage, like the West Ham people, the ICF people, they'd gone, and he had these road runners like motorbike road rap type people, and it was just awful. And I remember Jimmy going off stage and coming back on and doing his big speech saying, you know, I give everything for you and you killed me, and but I think Stephen Paul were there and I thought, fuck that, we're doing this. And that was the end of the Champions. You know, that was an awful night, that young Nazi London United. Horrible people.
I had some friends that went, and I've heard the stories. But around about that time, that's when the Rejects first came into Sounds to introduce themselves.
They did. They sort of tricked me a bit. Like there was a little bit of the Artful Dodger about them, you know. They actually told me they had a full band going and all this sort of stuff. The drummer couldn't be there; he'd been in a car crash. That's what they used when we put them in the studio. Oh, the drummer's coming, but he's in the car crash. They didn't have a fucking drummer, and that's why Pete Wilson ended up playing drums on that first EP. But they had so much charisma about them and energy, and you know, they were just. That first EP, that one that came out on Small Wonder, I like Punk and I Like Sham, I got nicked over West Ham. What a fucking great song that is. Yeah.
But that was a great introduction for them. But it's, you know, maybe the football connection, you know, probably was the thing that did them in the end.
Well, I think I said this on that Rejects film. The difference between Iron Maiden and the Rejects was that Iron Maiden would go out and say, we're West Ham, you're Manchester, you're Liverpool, whatever you are, tonight we'll have a party. They go out and say, we're West Ham, you're Liverpool, you're cunts, he wants it, you know, and that's what it was just. Mercifully, I wasn't there at the Birmingham gig. But you know, everyone knows what a terrible night that was.
Were you at Hatfield?
Hatfield when the Madness played.
Yeah.
No,
that's another one of the worst.
That was one of the worst ones. But I knew the people involved. I mean, it was because Grant was there, and Grant was one of the ones who had a little Union Jack and could over in the mud. And these older guys turned up who were basically Red Action, and saw Union Jack and thought, oh, they must be fascists, and started just slicing up young kids. It was terrible. It was the worst thing that they ever did. That was, you know. And they just attacked teenagers. These were grown men attacking teenagers because they got a Union Jack flag on.
But it was a funny old time, you know. There was violence was a regular occurrence at gigs.
Yeah, it was a violent time. I mean, even the poor old lurkers suffered really badly from the violence.
But even Adam and the Ants had a fairly violent following at the beginning.
Adam and the Ants, yeah. In fact, I think the first Adam and the Ants gig I ever saw was when they played the Elephant Castle, maybe early '78, something like that, with some polytechnic at the Elephant Castle, and I just remember it ended with loads of cop cars and loads of ambulances. It just got really heavy. It was violent times. Yeah.
But that was the print college, wasn't it? Elephant and Castle.
It could have been. It could have well have been. Yeah, London College of Printing.
Right at the roundabout. So the Rejects were coming. You got involved with them as a manager.
They asked me to manage them.
A loose management, or
I mean, I got them as far as I could take them. I was getting them gigs. So obviously, I got them gigs at the Bridge House and places like that. Which, and then I got Jimmy Percy involved, and we went into EMI. And at the time, really, I didn't fully understand how easy it was, how much they wanted bands like this. I got them £125,000 advance to do 4 albums.
This is a lot of money back then.
Back then, it's huge. But I think if I just said, well, I'll make it a bit more, I would probably could doubled it. But I didn't realise, I wasn't into all of that. But when I got that EMI deal with Chris Briggs, I thought, this is not me. I'm out of my depth. I don't really know what I'm doing. Yeah. And that's when I thought, you need I'll find him a better manager. And I said to Jimmy, who's a better manager? And he
Tony Gordon.
Tony Gordon. I wasn't really into. All I wanted was for them to do well, and I thought they needed a better manager. That's basically it.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't the right decision, but So they got signed to EMI, and Tony Gordon took them over. Really, they needed someone like Led Zeppelin's manager. They needed him.
Yeah.
Someone who was tougher than them and smarter than them. But Tony had managed Lulu, he wasn't really.
And then Boy George.
Yeah,
but
then Boy George.
Yeah. Mickey's one of the great guitarists. Without a shadow of a doubt. He's probably hampered in the fact of the connection with punk that he was never able to take it on to another level.
He had the chance to play guitar for Ozzy Osbourne after Randy Rhoads died. After Randy was a superb guitarist. After Randy died, Ozzy wanted Mickey to be his guitarist. But when he went to meet Ozzy, I don't know if you know this story. Got to the hotel room, and Ozzy had Ross Halfin naked on a lead, walking him around like a dog, and Mick just hated it because he hates bullying, and he just in the end he punched Ozzy on the jaw and walked out. So that was the end of Mickey's attempt Mickey's chance to join in the Blizzard of Oz.
So in you kind of like 79, you've got the mod revival really coming through off the back of Quadrophenia. You've got Two-Tone coming through.
Yes.
You've got I'll say the second wave of punk, which is the tail end of 78 into 79. The Upstarts, the Rejects.
Yeah. You could go out every night and see a great band. It was superb. It was superb. Yeah.
But then kind of like for some reason, in 1980, you decided to do the album. How did that come about?
Right. Well, I decided that with the Upstarts and the Rejects as a vanguard, that something was changed about punk, and I thought that punk had become different. This punk was different from the original punk in that it was more authentically working class. And the sound was different because instead of what the difference was, the guitars were heavier, but the chants were more like terrace chants. It was more a football thing. It became more. That was what defined. I think they were the defining key differences. So I thought we need to recognise this as something new. And I think me and Dave McCulloch throughout '79 and into '80 were writing about new punk and real punk, but it wasn't really the right. And because Jeff, when he went on stage, he would always say, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, he'd always say "oi," which is like the old Cockney. Yeah. I thought, well, this is a great word, and so I thought, it's oi. They're the oi bands, and we started. They let me start an oi the column in towards the end of 1980 the album I think came out towards the end of 1982, didn't it? Yeah.
But they weren't exclusively oi bands on that first album, were they?
It was young.
I suppose it didn't exist really at that point.
No. What it was. I think a different way of saying it would be say they were street rock and roll bands. They were working class rock and roll bands. They were, in that sense, and that's what we marked them. So I had Snorting the Dogs and Cock Sparrow because they were the roots of it. Yeah. To me, they were the roots of it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't have Menace. I should have had Menace. I could have had Menace, but I never did. Maybe their publishing weren't available or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we had I had most of that year. I think I went round. I had a thing called Two Men and you won't remember this probably. I had a thing called Two Men and a Bike.
Okay.
And we went round different. Me and Ross went round different parts of the world. different parts of England finding bands. That's what I did when I thought everyone in the music press was very West End centred. They didn't want to go outside. Didn't want to go outside Soho. They wanted to go to gigs that was paid for by record companies, and they wanted to be treated to lavish free drinks and lunches and all this sort of bollocks. I thought, well, there's a world out there they're not going to. Then I never once saw any of them people at the Bridge House. And I thought, well, if I'm not seeing them at the Bridge House, I'm not seeing them in Nottingham, I'm not seeing them in Edinburgh. So I started going around the country trying to find these different bands. I went down to Brighton and saw the Test Tube Babies and all that sort of stuff. Went up to Edinburgh and did The Exploited. So
that was the first time I read about The Exploited, was when they played the YMCA, and you did a review of it.
Yeah, there you go.
And you referenced their crew, which was kind of like people that I knew, as the Ford and Baldies, Big Bongo,
Big
Bongo and Bear.
Yeah, Big Bongo.
You know?
And Fat John, wasn't it? Big John, yeah.
And Garry.
Oh yeah, but I like them. I mean, they were mad, but that's probably one of the reasons I liked them, because they were flipping mad.
But what made you do that one then? Had you heard of The Exploited before then? Or was this just an opportunist, get on your bike with Ross and you've landed in Edinburgh?
There was no record company involved, so there was no favours involved. I honestly don't remember why. I remember I did, round about August, I would have reviewed their debut EP. Army Life. And you better give up the army. Oh, great.
Fuck the mods on the other side.
Yeah, a rather ill-conceived B-side.
Yeah, of course.
God, woman got killed through that, you know, for that, and that antipathy stupid antipathy between punks and mods.
We went through to Edinburgh once, me and my mum and one of my sisters, and I went and met my friends outside Listen Records, which is where John used to work. And I met up with some other friends from Edinburgh, and they were all waiting for the mods to turn up. So kind of like the mods turned up, we chased them down Princess Street. I ran past my mum. My mum goes, "Oi, Rule, what are you doing?" I'm like.
A bit later, I went to Berlin with them, West Berlin, before the wall came down. When they ended up pissing on the wall and almost destroying the Entente Cordiale. It was all a bit, they were great company. A bit mad, obviously.
I think so, but it was. I mean, they weren't part of the oi scene.
No, not really. No.
But what you wanted from the person who bought that album, what you wanted was to do a cross-reference between punks and skinheads.
Yeah,
so
it was always
it wasn't just one particular.
To me, it was all about class.
Yeah.
Class was what mattered. It was all about these. No matter what dress style you had, it was a newspaper that tried to make it all skinheads, and eventually succeeded. But it wasn't ever supposed to be that. It was always supposed to be about skins and punks. And to be honest with you, the first people who were at when I was involved with the Rejects, the first people who came to that gig were there were no skinheads at the gig when I put them on at the Bridge House. None at all. I think they were supporting Gary Lemon. I think Lemon was headlining.
Little Roosters.
With the Little Roosters, yeah. But the people who came were like, it had might have been skinheads, but their hair was grown out, and they were like people from Tottenham. It was Arsenal. It was obviously West Ham, and Chelsea. They were all there. They were all geezers. They were like football people.
Yeah.
It wasn't skinheads at all. There were no skinheads. Skinheads hated the Rejects at the time. It's only the press that rewrote history about that and changed history through it.
But then, I suppose, bands like the Foreskins came out with the Rejects.
Yes, they did. Yeah,
with Garry and
so
with
did
Tom.
and bands like Criminal Class Infrared came out of the Upstarts. Yeah.
So were the Foreskins a band when you did the album, or
so they said?
So they said, yeah.
But I really, whether that matters or not, I don't know. Because were Spain Nobody a band when they got signed? Probably not. They didn't. So, but I think they were a concept more than a band.
Yeah.
They told me they'd done things, but I don't think they had. But the Rejects told me they'd done things they hadn't done. But the sound of those first, all I would say is the records are what matter, and those tracks, those songs were great. Wonderful World and ACAB still sound fantastic today.
But I like the Hodges version of Yesterday's Heroes. When they slowed it down, Brave New World, that tempo, You know, it's got a classier sound. You know, but
Yeah.
but that album then went on to influence new bands that came through.
Well,
You know?
almost immediately, I started getting tapes through from people. And started getting contacted by people.
Yeah.
And it was I had, Blitz, obviously,
Partisans.
and the Partisans. Yeah, they were. Oh, by the time we did the third album, all these great new bands had come through. Well, that's when I got the phone call from Lowell, saying he was a mate of the Cockney Rejects. I'm not sure if that was true. And have a listen to the business, and I really liked the business. So I liked product, and I liked
Out in the Cold.
Out in the Cold.
Streets Where We Live.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I think Out in the Cold and Product were the first ones I heard, and I thought, oh, God, that's something good. Of course, I've been at the same school as them, so I was slightly interested. Yeah, I mean, there was a load of great bands, and had it not been for Southall, I think it would have got even bigger.
But Sci-Fi, and you recorded, the second album had come out, Strength Through All, had come out before Sci-Fi.
Yes, that's right. In May it came out, and Southall was July.
Yeah, and there wasn't a big uproar about the Nicky Crane on the front cover.
I don't think
at that
anyone
point,
knew.
you know.
Nobody knew.
I grew up in Scotland, so I never knew who Nicky Crane was at
I
that
didn't
point.
know who Nicky Crane was. He was a fucking dustman from Crayford. Why would anyone know who the fuck he was?
So the second album, because the first album was on EMI,
Yes, that's right.
second album was on Decca.
They came to me. They wanted it. I knew.
Okay.
I knew. Tracy Bennett. It was Tracy. Tracy wanted them. Tracy had Splodge.
Okay.
So that's why I knew Tracy.
Yeah.
And so they had the second album. And the third one, it was Martin Hooker on Secret Records. And we kept it secret for the next two.
Yeah. So, but that second album, you had newer bands that had come through and
Yes.
had formed. So I don't think there was any. They were all original recorded items, weren't they? The second one.
Yeah, we did it down the Old Kent Road. We did it. I can't remember the name of the studio, but it was down the Old Kent Road. Garry Johnson came down and did his. I had to force him to do the poems. He was so averse to performing in that situation.
Yeah.
I thought Garry got in touch with me. Gary was one of the ones who got in touch with me after all the album because he just identified with what we were trying to do. He knew, and Garry was a socialist. Obviously, he was quite, by today's standards, a left-wing socialist. But he saw the connection between what he was doing and what the bands were about. Being young, working class, and having something to say.
Yeah. But which was what my connection was. You know, you live in a Scottish new town where there was no class, it was just one class, and that was it. It was all new houses. You kind of like, and for me, all I wanted to hear was new music all the time.
Yeah.
You know, that's all I wanted. Because you'd write about bands, and I'd be like, what did they sound like? And you couldn't hear what they sounded like. The classic one,
Unless John Peel played it.
Spoils of War, kind of like had a full page in sounds.
Yeah.
I'd heard them for 30 years or 40 years, and then I realised they got a song included on a compilation, and they were a band prior to Spoils of War.
Oh, okay.
You know, they were called the Rowdies, and they did a song called ACAB as a single in '78.
A different song from...
Different one. You know, but if in 1981, I think they were in sounds. For me, I wanted to hear what they sounded like, but you couldn't at that point. You know, that was, and you couldn't listen to John Peel because you'd have to listen to loads of music you didn't really want to hear at that particular time to get to one good song.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Although Peel was a big champion of...
Yeah.
What used to piss Mickey Gaggers off was that Peel loved the Postman more than the Rejects. The Postman being...
Yeah.
Jeff's...
But did the Postman ever record anything apart from the first Soy album, wasn't it? They did something?
Yeah, I did some gigs. I saw them do a gig.
Okay. Did the Foreskins do a gig in '79 supporting the Damned at the Bridge House?
That's right, I was there, yeah. That was a really nasty moment, actually.
Was it?
For me.
Yeah.
Because I remember going down there and suddenly I found myself surrounded by British movement people. There was some nasty bastards there. Matty Morgan, Steve Morgan, Dick Barton, people like that, and they were around me. And I'll never forget this because I thought I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me. Obviously, they hated me because I was a left wing and also because I worked for the media.
Yeah.
And Kevin Wells came through them and he just went up and said, like that to me. And he said, "You all right, girl?" I said, "Yeah, I think so, Kev." But because he did that, they fucked up.
Right.
Cause they realised
They
that if they
escalate.
messed with me, they'd mess with them. So, but, I mean, Christ, I'll never forget Kevin Wells doing that.
Yeah. But you had a few bother at gigs in the early 80s.
I did. It got pretty nasty. I got beaten up when I went to see the Upstarts with Tony Barker, who was a teenager at the time, and one of his mates.
Yeah.
And
From Tilbury.
yeah, the Tilbury boys. Yeah. And we got Tilbury skins, and I got attacked by about 15 British movement, and so like I got like fucking hit and knocked down, and that, and we just went, and I know I got home covered in blood, and my wife said you better go to hospital. So I went up, and nothing. It wasn't bad, but it was pretty unsettling. I got I had knives pulled on me at Charing Cross by a couple of British movement skinheads. They published my address in Bulldog, which was the Young National Front paper, when I lived on the Ferry Estate in Pinto Way, and we got real hate mail through, most of it I think from Belfast, but we got some real hate mail, and to the extent where we had to move to a different address on that. It got really heavy for a while, and then Screwdriver put out leaflets saying like they'd been banned from playing London, and they blamed me. And it was like the leaflet said, "Beat the band, beat Bushell." So of course, obviously, I'm the fucking fool guy in all this. But firstly, if I'd had the power to ban bands, I'd have started with fucking Soft Cell. And secondly, they were just getting banned because they were fucking Nazis and nobody wanted them.
Yeah. But of course, the first time I met you was 1982. At the end, the end of '82, and
Have you got a strong grip?
I was off to see the second Screwdriver gig when they'd the first gig they hadn't come out. The second gig, it was awful. It was just terrible. It was just like a Nuremberg rally where they just had hate, and to live a life like that was not something I wanted to be associated with. So we left halfway through. Menzies was at the same gig, and I couldn't understand. Apart from money was involved, somebody was going to make money out of it at some point. So, but it was clearly by that point things were changing. Music was changing, so it kind of like I suppose, which was the last Oi album you put out, Oi of Sex?
Oh no, the last one I did was Oi Oi That's Your Lot, which I think was 82.
Right.
Yeah. But really, I think the Daily Mail played a big part in turning it into something it wasn't. And it got to so like, the reality of Oi was never properly reported.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't like The Guardian, but the only paper that ever did Oi justice was The Guardian, because Alan Rushbridger, who was then a reporter, who ended up being the editor, actually came down after Southall and spoke to us.
Yeah.
And I remember he just Max Splodge pointing at a bit of grass in the cracked pavement, saying that's Peckham Park. I mean, it's quite funny. But
I've had him take the mickey out of me in the back of an Upstarts van once. And
he's a funny fellow.
He is, yeah. Him and Menzies going at me for half an hour. He's just like, oh man.
Yeah. They were the only ones who actually bothered to talk to any of us.
Yeah.
Everyone else just took it as read that it was this thing, which it never was.
No.
Could the Daily Mail say? In any other instance, would anyone believe everything the Daily Mail said?
Yeah.
No. But I think it's a general class prejudice. I really do. I think it's working class people who are doing something a bit outrageous. They must be as bad as it can possibly be.
But is that then the power of the press, and how the press and then kind of like get people to believe in something that it's not actually that?
Well, it's interesting.
People buy into what they can read.
It's interesting that obviously they say that newspapers are the first draft of history, and that's true. But the first draft of history can often be very wrong, and it takes people to come along later and say, well, actually, no, it wasn't there. And when you look at the full facts, but I've had it hang over me for all of my life.
Yeah.
Because and I don't think I was I was as left wing as you could be for a long time. I mean, until about the mid-80s when I just got reality changed my mind. But you know,
but when I grew up in Scotland, I wasn't aware of any kind of like right-wing connections to oi music. You know,
because it wasn't there. It wasn't there. If you listen to the songs, where is it? If you talk to the people involved, where was it? You know, if you go and say, well, these people in the audience were, well, these people were in the audience of every fucking band. Because the people like the right-wing parties were drawing 15-20% in every election they stood in. Why would there not be some of those people in our audience? But to say that therefore we must be tarnished by that. Well, why wasn't West Ham tarnished by that? Because they had fucking loads of them there.
but you, because we were talking about earlier, you were really the one that created the football hooligan industry, because you regularly name checked West Ham, some Arsenal, some Chelsea. So from that, growing up in Scotland, you'd be aware of certain characters because you write about them. You know,
well,
so
I was meeting them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were interesting characters, and it's quite interesting now to think back to those people. How many of them, the ones that aren't dead or in prison, how many of them actually went on and had careers in businesses and actually made money out of it? Because they were that sort of people. They weren't passive people. They were like,
yeah.
I mean, Spanner and Swallow and people probably should mention, you know, who just went up and built businesses. Yeah, good luck to them. You know, they had a bit of something about them. They came from nothing. They came from, like we all did, we came from normal working class families, but they had that little bit of edge to them.
But it kind of like, it did change in '79 when Thatcher came in, when they started dismantling the UK and the UK industry. You know, so you then had to find your own path out. I think you had to find your own entertainment, which is, I suppose, why I came in with doing a fanzine and getting involved with a band. That was more exciting than for me going to school. You know, so it was, those people are the ones who found, you know, kind of like other avenues to make money, like the Knockers. You know.
Which of course was Andy Swallow and all
Danny
Harrington and Danny Harrison
and Woolwich.
Yeah. You know, which are basically fucking conning people. He's half a daily.
But you had to make money. You had to survive. You were never, you know.
Well, they did that in Chislehurst down the road from here. That was when they were knocking up. Yeah.
And that fake. When they got chased by Millwall, or meant to be Millwall. You know, but for me, because I started coming to London '82, and I'd stayed with Lol the first time I came to London by myself, and it was very territorial back then. You know, if you were, because Lol lived in Forest Hill, if we were in, because I remember one night in Ladywell where it's only about a mile between each other, that it was a bit tasty, you know. If you were in the wrong pub at the wrong time, you know. So it's
that's probably true of all big cities, though, isn't it?
But it changed. You know, whether Acid House changed it or not, you know, something did change in the late 80s.
You're right, that did. I mean, well, you speak to Grant Fleming, because Grant will tell you.
Yeah.
He was doing, he was on acid and going down. On ecstasy and going down, and all these people were there that should have been wanting to kill him. They were cuddling him. Yeah. I mean, I never did ecstasy, so I don't know. But.
My mate got told. Terry Farley told me once he was on a dance floor and somebody asked him what he did for a living, and he said, "I'm a painter." And the person who was a posh person kind of like bought in that he was a painter, when in reality he was a painter and decorator, you know, and a bad one at that, knowing Terry. You know, but it's London, like I said, in the early 80s was quite a rough part to come, you know, and there was you tried it with the casual thing with mixed band with accent.
With accent,
and, you know, because I was living in Manchester at that time, but they never really had the music to back it up, did they?
That's the problem. You know? They had the style, but not the songs. But, you know.
I was with Mick last week, so I kind of like...
He's got a hotel, would he?
No, he had a hotel. He's got a bar now in Kemp Town, you know, and he'll admit himself they weren't that good. But they had the fashion and he had the right idea, you know. And I think no one could really market music-wise for casuals because they were all into different sorts of music, whether it was punk, whether it was oi, or whether
it was mostly soul, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was mainly soul.
Yeah.
You know, all kind of like the younger lot would get into electro and hip hop. But in '83. That's when things, I suppose, started changing for you at times, because you know the music was changing.
Yeah, I was feeling less into it, really.
When did you write your Punk is Dead article?
Well, I think that was '82.
Okay.
Because I think I did it as a I know I did it as a wind up, and I think it was after the business had sacked Lowell, stupidly, and Blitz had done some sort of. Well, I actually wrote a song about it. I wrote a song about it because the Go Dead song "Punk Rock Will Never Die" includes the words Blitz went psychedelic, the Regis went HM, the Upstarts turned to reggae, no one's uglier than them. It's all a load of bollocks, as boring as before, but the kids who live for punk rock keep on coming back for more. That was basically how I felt. Just felt let down because I felt I'd invested myself in trying to keep it all alive, and then they all fucked. Infrared did that terrible second album. I used to think, fucking hell, have I done it all for this shit? And alright, maybe it was a bit self-centered of me to be like that, but I thought I want to give it a fucking punch up the trousers again, you know.
I remember you gave me Still From The Heart on cassette when I was in your office. I listened to that all the way back to Scotland, and I suppose after listening to that, you kind of get ingrained in, it's actually quite a good album. And to give the Upstarts the credit, what Menzies did over those years, he tried different styles of music, always tried to do things different, and that's to his credit as a band. He didn't just do the same thing.
I like them a lot. I like them a hell of a lot. Can I just depart from the narrative you're on and just say one of the funniest moments ever was when I was up in Scotland covering the Angelic Upstarts, and
with Infrared supported.
4B2 support.
4B2s.
4B2 support.
I was at the Infrared gig in 1980 or 81 it was.
See, I can't remember what
81, January 81.
I can't remember.
I thought you were there because I thought you did a review of it.
I might have been, but actually I don't remember. I interviewed Steve Diggle in 1978, but I forgot that completely. Because when he told me about it, I said, no, I didn't. And I had to go back and look at my own cuttings of it. Oh yeah, I did actually. But at this particular time, it was the 4B2s, and I can't remember what year it was. It might have been 1980. But we were up there in Scotland, and I was surprised to see the 4B2s were staying in the same hotel as I was. And my hotel, obviously paid for by Sound, it was quite a nice hotel. And the Upstarts who were headlining were staying in some crappy hotel down the road. And I got in there and Jock said, Gary, come over. He said, have a nice, do you want a steak? Have it on us. Get me a steak. Do you want champagne? I said, no, lager's fine. Something, I'm eating steak with Jock McDonald, I'm drinking lager. And he said, it's all on us. Like, how the hell can I afford this? He had stolen a load of headed newspaper from the Upstarts record label, which I think was probably WEA, was it Warner's? Warner's, it was Warner's. And he had just, before faxes, he'd sent letters to all these, he had a printed letter saying, apparently from the managing director, rather than CEO, managing director of Warner's, saying all of this band's expenses are to be charged back to our company. So he'd basically got away with this for about a week before he was led off in handcuffs. That was Jock. He was just such a character, wasn't he? Such a chancer.
Because I used to write and slag off Blue Ron Nile Turk, but I wouldn't mess with Chris.
No,
and I know about Jock going down to Blitz one night to have it off with him, and Chris and all that chase him all over the place.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
And I wouldn't mess with Chris, but I do remember. I do remember they were the focal point of you two to pick on to
I don't remember that, but it's probably because of the name and the image rather than yeah. And probably for my own ignorance of jazz, not knowing the roots of the name.
So do you think then in '83, so Accent must have been the middle of '83 or maybe the end of '83. Do you think that was then? There was no new music for you to write about at that point, you know.
There was the Alarm and bands like that, wasn't there? Was that about the same time?
Yeah.
I can't remember. My memory's so poor now.
Yeah.
I know I was slightly frustrated. I know I was always hoping for some. I had that hope for a long time that there would be another explosive guitar band coming through.
Yeah.
Which never seemed to happen.
Yeah.
So maybe I just felt. I'm just supposing. I don't know. Maybe I just felt frustrated that it wasn't happening. But there was nothing to get excited about. Case, bands like Case, who were
Case should have been bigger. Than,
they were held back by
Dave.
Dave Long,
Well, why did Dave hold them back for so long?
Why did Bernie Rhodes hold the Clash? The Specials back. You know, who knows what their thinking was. I mean, the Case had so much. He had, I can't remember the name of the singer now, but he had Matthew had so much charisma.
Yeah.
He had good songs.
Yeah.
I don't know what Dave was thinking.
Yeah. But I mean, Dave was dodgy for a reason. You know?
There you go. Well, you asked Max. If Max Blodge was here and you asked her about Dave, you wouldn't be able to broadcast it.
So it's kind of like you left Sounds in '85.
I left Sounds in '84, in the summer of '84, but I still carried on doing stuff for them. I left in '84, and I think I did the Iron Maiden book. Where Bruce Dickinson almost killed me, but that's another story. Twice he almost killed me. And I was just writing books, and I was doing the wastrel column for Sounds. That's all I was doing for Sounds as a freelance basis. And then Pat Lakestead, who was married to Bruce Foxton, was phoned up and basically she phoned up Gary Johnson and said, look, the Sun are looking for someone to freelance on to do some shifts on Bizarre, and Gary didn't want to do it, so he said to me, do you want to do this? So that's how from nowhere I ended up doing the shift on Bizarre, and I know I took 2 Black Bombers, and I know I just sat there for 2 days going just writing everything, and at the end of it I thought, well, that was it, that'll be the end of that. And then about a day or two later I got a phone call from the ad-lib column on the Standard. Then I got a phone call from the Mirror asking me if I wanted to do some. I ended up doing 6 weeks on the Mirror in the summer of 1985, and then I got approached by the Sun as give me a 6-month contract at the end of towards the end of '85, and I just never stopped after that. But I was, I really was a fish out of water, to be honest with you. I always felt a bit strange there. But
then there was a bit of a resurgence of music papers, maybe '87 when Alan Lewis took over the NME.
Yeah.
Because then they became a bit more populist, and they started writing about, I suppose, better bands. Stuart Cosgrove was writing.
And it was always the ska bands coming through again, wasn't there? There was a lot of good ska bands coming through.
But Lol had continued doing oi music, through the mid '80s.
He kept it alive. With the albums Garry compiled, the later oi albums, which we were always on. We always did stuff on it. Yeah.
But through that, you kind of like something we talked about earlier. It then attracted a worldwide audience.
I wasn't aware of this. I mean, because when I started doing national newspapers permanently, I was in a different world, and I don't think it was until sometime in the '90s when I can't remember what year. I'm really sorry. I can't remember what year. It must have been the early '90s, and I was a target for a Noel Edmonds gotcha.
Okay, yeah.
And I got flown to Los Angeles for this strange setup, which not really relevant. But my friend Christine Peake had been a Page Free girl, she'd gone over there and she'd become a PR, and I got in touch with her. I thought I knew I was going to be going over there, and went back to her flat, her apartment with her, and she was sharing it with this Susan Diner, who I didn't know at the time, but Susan Diner did the Punk's Not Dead film years later, and she said, "Oh yeah, Susan knows all the bands you like." I'm looking through Susan's CDs and she's got the fucking Rejects, the Upstarts, she's got the Gonad. What? It was like an eye-opener to me. I had no idea that I had no way of knowing back then, before the internet, how much impact we made around the world.
Yeah.
It was only years later that Andre Schlesinger got in touch with me from New York and saying that, Man in Black and the Press, and telling me how he'd formed the Press because of Tucker's Ruckers. I thought, really? And I had no idea how when you're doing things like we were doing, I just thought I was in the moment.
Yeah.
I didn't think it'd have any resonance afterwards, and yet it did. He had a fantastic tail, as they call it now, a long tail, all this stuff. And even to this day, I get contacted by people from Asia, Southeast Asia, and from around the world, really, South America. All these bands who want me to do their stuff because they liked all the stuff I did back then, all the stuff I wrote about back then.
Yeah.
And it's quite humbling, really, to think you can have that influence on people, or the bands you write about can have that influence.
Well, on Parole that I was involved with, they had Condemned on the Country for Heroes Volume 2. A Mexican band covered that about 6 months ago, and me and Liam and Dougie, who I still speak to, were just like, this is amazing. After 40 years, that some band from Mexico thinks it's the best song that they know, and did a cover of it, and it's just like,
it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But when we did our little tour, a mini tour of America in 2017, and we were in San Diego, and me and Clyde are sitting there, and a young Mexican girl in her teens, she's coming in the bar we're in, we're waiting along, it's way ahead of our set time, and she's gone to the jukebox and she put on these fantastic ska songs. Like all this great skinhead reggae stuff as well. And I said to her, "Look, excuse me, I'm not a pervy person, but I'm asking, how do you know these songs?" Her mum and dad were Mexican skinheads. And about 20 people came over the border to see us play. I mean, I'm amazed anyone was to see us. And I just thought, it just goes to show how everything
as a cycle,
and also has a global reach now. And you get people come up to me, I really can't hear very well anymore, and my memory's shot to fuck. But I know people come up and they're like skinheads from Switzerland, and they just want to say thank you to me. I think that's really nice, because I never did it for anything other than the fact that I was there and I wanted to record it, and all I ever wanted to do with the Oi bands was to say, the stuff you've read about them is shit. They weren't like that. It was never about that. It was never about fucking politics. It was always about football, and it was about Clarks, and it was about whatever, That's what it was about.
Yeah.
So I think the truth is out there, but by the time the historians catch up with it, I'll be long gone, I think.
But you look at gigs now, they're a lot more tamer than they were in the early 80s.
It's lovely now.
Exactly. Everybody likes each other.
Everyone's cuddling each other.
But a lot of
you got a rebellion. There's no trouble. There's never any fights. I've seen.
I think a lot of probably bands, those early bands, kind of like struggle for melody. But if you listen to a lot of bands now, there's a lot of melodies, a lot of harmonies going on, and it's probably better musicians now than they were back then.
And you listen to the bands now who cite the Oi bands as influences. They're fucking Green Day. Dropkick Murphys.
The
Rancid and people people like that.
Yeah.
They're massive fucking bands.
Yeah. But it amazes me that, you know, Cocksparrow, and I know the reasons why, but Cocksparrow is so big, you know, and all the songs have melodies in it, and then have a connection with you as a person, so you can understand that on that front, you know. So, but for me, it's brilliant to see that. You know, I saw them 83 when they played Manchester when they reformed, and
after troops out.
They were just tight for the whole set. You know, they were probably the most professional band that I'd seen. Yeah. But then you realise they'd started playing.
They've been going in the early
1972.
That's
you know,
right.
This was 50 years this year. You know, and they were great musicians.
Yeah.
You know, and it's.
Steve Burgess wrote some good songs.
Yeah. But
although I did wind him up when the last time I see him, because when I had the last album out, not this, I can't remember when it was. I can't remember which album it was, but it was like a few years ago, and I knew that Daryl had written a few of the songs. So I said, I loved the new album, but I just said to him, that song's great. And I knew it, Daryl, and he's going, Daryl wrote that. He said, what about that one? I love that one. Daryl wrote that.
But they played at one of your birthdays, didn't you? When Gary Lamin was in them.
That's right.
You know, he
reformed,
joined them when they reformed.
They reformed to play at my birthday party. I think it was
82.
No, I think it was.
Must have been 82 or maybe 83.
It was earlier. I think it was 81.
Okay.
But you might be right. But I had a birthday. I had my. Right. 1980, I had a birthday. Right. 1979, I had a birthday bash in East London where the Ruts played. 1980, I had a birthday party at the Bridge House where I thought maybe Cocksparrow played. 1981, I had a birthday party at the Bridge House where definitely Judge Dredd was there, and I thought the Foreskins played.
So you took the 82 then?
No, I didn't do one in 82. I think it was 80.
Okay.
I think it was 80.
Did the business do 82?
I don't remember having one in 82, but my memory is not reliable.
Yeah. That was
it's an unreliable memory. But I know that one year it was Judge Dredd and the Foreskins and one year it was Cocksparrow.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell you which one. I know 79 was the Ruts for sure.
But you're still kind of like, you know, for me, from an early age, it was all about listening to music I've never heard before.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
It's kind of like,
I wanted to find something new and exciting.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I used to DJ, I'd hate people asking for the same songs week in, week out. All I wanted to hear was new music, and that's still the same, you know, 55 years or 45 years later. It's new music. It's something you've never heard before. You know?
I'm still hoping someone comes through and breaks through and drags it all back down to earth again. I do like the Barstool Preachers. I like Buster Shuffle. There's a lot of good bands about.
Yeah. I think it's good in the fact that, you know, that there's an avenue for these bands to play. You know, it's probably not so good that there's not a paper that will support them.
Here's the problem.
You know, but you know, if you're good enough and you can put the effort in and you can work hard, then, you know, you can make your own realities, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I've been watching Lion's Law quite a bit on YouTube, and you can see the energy and you know how, you know, one of my pet hates is kind of like when a band goes on stage and they just stand there. You know, you need to have energy on stage.
Energy, yeah.
If you've got energy on stage, then people can connect to it. You know, and if there's no energy, you can create it. You know.
So when Jeff goes on, it's always like he's still doing the punching, isn't he? He does the punching.
Yeah, but it's kind of because we were talking about earlier. It's great for me to see bands like the Rejects, bands like Cocksparrow, bands like the Business still playing.
Yeah.
You know, 40 odd years, 50 years, you know, down the line. Because for me, 83, 84 was kind of like it was on its arse at that point. You know, everything was changing.
Yeah.
You know, and but to see them continue, break up, come back, you know, it's a good thing. Thanks very much, Gary, for your time.
Well, lovely to see you, mate.
Likewise.